Hello and welcome to another episode of the Brighter Thinking Pod from Cambridge University Press. I'm your host, David Hickinson, and today I'm joined by two guests who have a wealth of experience with hands-on learning. John Pinkney comes to us from the excitingly named Raising Robots and works with primary and secondary schools to integrate robotics into classroom teaching. He's a learning advisor and a certified LEGO education trainer. John, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Our other guest is Stuart Swann, is a former ICT Lead and now a consultant, and is a LEGO Education Academy trainer who regularly delivers training to teachers in both primary and secondary schools. Stuart, welcome as well.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
So, John, Raising Robots sounds very futuristic. And when people talk about robots, I'm never quite sure whether I should be excited or slightly scared. Tell me about Raising Robots. What's that to do with?
Well, everything about Raising Robots is exciting and none of it's scary. And the reason for that is we spend our time working with young people and teachers in the area of robotics. And there's a lot of robotics going on in schools, whether it's little floor robots like B-bots for younger children, right up to larger humanoid robots that people might see like Now and Pepper. And I spend most of my time as a LEGO Education Certified Trainer working with LEGO robots and raising beautiful creations in classrooms across the country. So it's an exciting place to be.
That does sound at the more exciting end. I'm glad to hear that. And Stuart, you're a LEGO Education trainer. Tell me a bit about the work you do there.
Yeah, absolutely. Both myself and John have been certified LEGO Education trainers for around about 10 years now. And what it really involves is working with teachers, working with young people in schools, quite often with teachers who have purchased LEGO Education resources. And it really is about making sure they get that same level of excitement as the children get when they get hands-on with these products, and really realize what a fantastic impact using robotics and using manipulatives like Lego can have in their classroom right across their curriculum. So it really is one of those jobs that's an absolute joy. We get to work with learners, we get to work with teachers, and we get to play. And can't really ask for more on a day-to-day basis.
That sounds pretty good in terms of playing. Do you ever just go and play at lunchtimes with Lego? Is that
It has been known, yes. Once it's there, it's very hard to keep your hands off. And I'm sure we'll talk much more about the importance of play as we go through the podcast. But it really is an absolute joy.
Yeah, those sound like the best lunches then, I think, if that's the case. So for everyone listening along today, if you haven't already guessed, we are recording remotely. So please bear with us if we have any issues. And remember, all the links to the information we discuss are available in the show notes. You can also get in touch with us on Twitter using the hashtag BrighterPod or by tweeting us at CUP Education. So, Stuart and John, one of the things we like to do in the podcasts this season is trying to get to know our guests a little bit better. So we've been asking everyone to describe the favourite lesson that they've taught. So hopefully you've got some good examples of this. Who wants to go first?
Well, I'll jump in, Stuart, because I'm slightly older than Stuart. So I've been teaching a little bit longer than Stuart. So I've probably got more things to choose from. And it's always nice to look back and think about when you started teaching all those years ago and, the sort of teaching that you're doing now. And there are lots of real highlights in it. And one of mine is actually a recent experience. And that was when I was doing some work with the LEGO Community Engagement team. And we were working with Secret Cinema. And they had the set of Stranger Things, which is a Netflix series set in the 1980s. And they'd invited some young people to go there. And I was to go there and teach them about robotics. And I'm going to be really honest with you, when they turned up, these 18, 19-year-olds, they were really nice, but they told me in no uncertain terms that they weren't really interested. And they actually told me that they didn't get on with each other. And I stood there thinking, well, this will be an interesting experience. I'd put a lot of effort into it, and I was a little bit nervous. I had some very playful activities planned, but the reason it's my favorite lesson is that I watched those barriers disappear. And there's no greater excitement than that. I watched 18 and 19-year-olds who didn't want to engage. I watched them playing with Duplo bricks, challenging each other, building up their resilience when failure struck, showing a sense of humor, and ultimately building beautiful robots together. And there were times that I didn't have a belief in myself, and I had to be strong, because those times I was thinking, I'm not sure this is going to work. And I always encourage myself to take risks. And I think that's a really important thing, because we encourage that in young people. And I think the most important thing about that day was to have belief in young people. And they start to believe in themselves. And I got to the end, and as they went off, they all wanted to shake my hand, which was very nice, because it was pre-COVID. It was in February. And they all told me things like they couldn't believe what they'd achieved. And I watched people leave that room very different from the people that came in. And I guess I was also a little bit of a different teacher, because I'd learned things through that process. So it was the exhilaration of learning, but also the exhilaration of teaching. And that would be my favorite lesson.
That sounds like an incredible kind of session or afternoon to have had, to be able to see everybody take that journey in such a short period of time.
It is. And these are the experiences that stay with you as a teacher. And, I think you would say that of, to all teachers, they would be able to tell you those exciting things that have happened. But also that lesson will have stayed with those young people. And that's really important. We talk about the impact of learning. They went away from there, and the things that they learned, they'll carry with them for the rest of their lives. I'm utterly convinced of it. And I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, that sounds great. Stuart, how about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I was really thinking hard about this question, because, John's point about when you leave a session like that, it's changed you as a teacher or as a facilitator as well. And that kind of happens a lot with what we do, because you see that joy and excitement and realization within both learners and teachers. So I'm going to be greedy, and I'm going to have two, if that's okay. The first one was way back when I was still a classroom teacher. So probably 1996 or 97. And I bought two sets for my school of the first iteration of Lego Education Mindstorms. And it was probably the first time that we used that in the classroom. And I approached it with the mindset, I'm just going to let these kids open this box and have a play and see what they do. And
the Lego Mindstorm, is that the Lego Mindstorm? Is that the kind of the programmable?
Yes. Well, it's certainly one of the programmable resources that's available. At that time, it was the only programmable resource that was available. And I watched a group of Year 5 children open these boxes and very quickly build a wheeled robot that they then programmed to move around the classroom. And that's when the penny dropped for me, that this kind of learning, this kind of hands-on learning, and not just using something that they've been given, but actually creating something from a random selection of bricks that they had absolute control over, was really my introduction, I guess, to this path of hands-on learning and learning by making and learning by doing. And that was an absolute, kind of light bulb moment for me as a teacher. As a trainer, I've been very, very fortunate to travel to all corners of the globe on behalf of Lego Education, delivering training and teaching to teachers and to young people. And what a memorable occasion was when I was visiting Trinidad, and it was the first time that they'd had Lego education resources on the island. So it was a new partner on Trinidad, and we ran a series of workshops over several days using a range of Lego education resources for both children, both young children and older children, and teachers who were just curious about what this was. And to see that same light bulb moment that I had in 1996 happen to those teachers and to those learners was absolutely fantastic. I got that same feeling because it was this coming together and people realizing just how great using these resources can be, and just how impactful it can be on learning. So I'm sorry I chose two. I was a bit greedy. It was hard to separate.
I really can't believe that you've been allowed to do two, Stuart.
Well, I had a chat with David earlier on. We had a bit of an agreement.
Unbelievable.
They both sound, well, all those stories sound, the common thread seems to be that this hands-on learning has had this kind of immediate, or this impact in a very short period of time, people being able to kind of engage with it in a very different way. That kind of brings us on then to the main topic, I suppose, of today's podcast, which is all about hands-on learning. So maybe we go back and we just start with that. Well, how would you describe hands-on learning? What would you think like a definition of that would be? John, do you want to start us off there?
I think the key thing about hands-on learning is that participants are actively involved in creating rather than just passively consuming it. And, for me, that's the big difference when you talk about hands-on learning. I think the characteristics of it are the fact that it's, it's fun. I think it keeps people lively in a classroom. I think it uses all parts of your brain. And, I think there's big advantages in terms of, from a teaching point of view, in terms of being able to actually watch learners learn. You're not just giving people knowledge, you're actually watching young people create knowledge. And it's a fascinating process. And, sometimes people say to me, when you do lots of these hands-on activities with young people, do you ever get bored? And I think the most important thing to say is, well, no, because, I've been doing these activities for probably 13 years and I see different outcomes at the end. And I think that's a really important aspect of hands-on learning, that you're never quite sure of what the end result will be. And that's the excitement of it.
Stuart, have you got anything to add to that definition there? Or
yeah, I absolutely agree. The one thing that I will add is that it can also offer a different accessibility point for many students. So when we think about learning, often barriers to learning are there due to language. The language, for example, that a question is presented to a learner might be in a form that they don't necessarily understand. It might actually be in a language that they don't understand. Whereas to do something physical, if you embody a learning concept, and that might be through hands-on learning, through building something actually tangible, or it might be some other kind of embodied learning, you're actually accessing learning in a very different way. And for many students, that is a way that suits them better, I guess. But John's absolutely spot on with the outcomes. It does provide a range of different outcomes, and that is the absolute joy. The fact that children can understand that through learning like this, through learning hands-on, through creating something that they have a vested interest in, through taking ownership of that there isn't necessarily one correct answer to a problem or to a task that is given to a learner. And that's a very, very important message, I think.
And it's quite a challenge as well, Stuart, because often young people walk into classrooms thinking there is one answer, thinking there's one solution. And, you know, we're often introduced as Lego education experts. And it's really difficult when you're introduced as an expert, because kids look and think, oh, well, he knows everything. I'm never going to be as good as that person. And, you know, the first thing I want children to see is that I don't know everything, and that their ideas might be better than my ideas. And that's always my aspiration when I teach. I want my students to be better than me. And that's an interesting challenge for teachers, because sometimes teachers, you know, you talk about the outcome that you're not sure about the outcome you're going to get. And for teachers, that can be quite a fearful thing. And teachers also worry that young people might know more than them. And, you know, particularly in the area of robotics, which is a fairly new area, and children are maybe a little bit more into it, so they can come past you quite quickly. And teachers are fearful of that. And I always say to teachers, do you know, if you get young people that have moved past you, it's a sign that you're a great teacher. That's where we want children to be as quickly as possible.
So can you give me an example then? So, because obviously we've talked a bit about robotics, and clearly there's a computing element to this. So can you give us like an example of how the hands-on bit lets you get into a topic? If you had a computing topic or one of these robotic topics, what would be a way that the hands-on activity would get into that in a better way?
You know, I think there's, you know, really to pick up on the other points that we've been making, there's lots of examples. And, you know, at the heart of this is really setting students and young people challenges and getting them to find the solutions. And we've talked, Stuart talked about Lego Mindstorms, which is a robotic set. We've now got Lego Spike Prime. Now, in there are lots of pieces, and you can put them together in many different ways. And when you get to the end of a hands-on learning session with Lego, you'll look around a classroom and everyone will have a different solution to a problem. So, you know, if I've been doing, say, a theme piece of work, maybe on humanitarian aid, and one of the challenges is to develop a rescue vehicle, they'll all develop different types of rescue vehicles. And there'll be ideas that come out that are completely different to what I would have thought. Now, I could have told everybody at the start how to build a rescue vehicle, and at the end of the lesson, everybody would have 30 vehicles that are just like mine. That's never going to let children become better than me. If they want to become better than me, they have to do things differently from me. And I think that's a key part of hands-on learning, is to set that challenge, to say to young people, yep, this is where I'm at, but go away now and be better, find a better solution.
Yeah, I think John's brought up a couple of things there that are worth expanding on. You know, firstly, the fact that when we set the children or the learners a challenge, it is wrapped up in a situation, and very often that's a real world situation. You know, we've identified real needs, real problems, or real scenarios that young people can relate to. So that immediately captures their interest. It immediately gives them ownership and agency over that task that we've set them. With a resource like Lego Education, as John said, we're going to get different results. You know, we might show the learners maybe some building techniques, but we would never dream of saying build this in this way. And of course, the very nature of Lego bricks means that you can very quickly put things together, try things out. Oh, that didn't quite work, or that's not quite working how I want it to work. Take it apart, put it back together again. And we always allow space and room for that. You know, it doesn't matter how outlandish young people want to make their models. You know, the more outlandish, the better, really, because then they're learning more. You know, they're learning that if they want to make a robotic vehicle that's 4 foot tall, that might have balance issues, that might have stability issues. So then they've got to think scientifically. They have to think like an engineer in order to kind of rectify those issues. So that can't happen without it being hands-on. You know, you can't do that in theory. And that really is the crux of it.
And I think, Stuart, I'm sure it's the same for you, but I always know when I'm making inroads in terms of the activities that I'm doing with young people, is that when they stop saying to me, am I allowed to? And is it all right if? It's, whenever I start, that's it. I have queues of people saying, I'm thinking of doing that. Am I allowed? And young people, there is a fear of failures, a fear of failure in schools. It's a very natural thing. We all worry about failing, but we also have to recognize that it's such a powerful learning process. It's got to be handled in the right way. And, we get it with, sometimes people say to me when we're doing robotics, we have conversations with teachers and they talk about who's learnt the most. And it's invariably not the students who got their robot across the line first. It's often the students whose robot went off left and fell down a set of stairs because they learnt things through that process. Mm-hmm. Anyone can, follow a set of instructions and make a robot go forward and get over a line. But doing it differently and finding different solutions, that's the challenge and that's the excitement of it.
It is, absolutely. And certainly, the occasions that John and I have worked together, and John mentioned Secret Cinema earlier on, and we both worked on the set of Casino Royale, Secret Cinema. So it was a very Bond themed day where we worked with a group of secondary school learners. And, one of the tasks that we set was to create a little ejector seat for their James Bond robot cars that would, eject the baddie. And, to see the variation in what they did. But more than that, to see that joy and that sense of accomplishment when they launched their little Lego minifigure, up into the air and over was absolutely palpable. And that's what learning's all about. And that's what we think Lego education and hands-on learning and maker learning can provide.
So you just mentioned maker learning at the end there. Is that different from hands-on learning or the same thing?
They are inextricably tied, I would say. Maker learning is it is an approach to learning, which inevitably includes hands-on learning. It's really about a learning approach that addresses real and relevant needs. It's a learning approach that gives the learner agency and authenticity over what they're learning, because what they create comes from their interests and comes from what they identify as their, if you like, personal learning goals. It is kind of steeped in educational theory. We don't talk too much about educational theory, but maker learning is this kind of mashup, if you like, of what we call constructionism, which was a learning theory developed by Seymour Papert, who is very important, very dear to Lego education. His learning theory and his book, which was called Mindstorms, is where Lego education draws a lot of inspiration from. It also comes from theories of constructivism, so people like Piaget and Vygotsky, and and also the theory of learning by doing, which we've spoken about as well, which an educationist called John Dewey. He did state that learning should be relevant and practical, not just passive and theoretical. So and that came from over 100 years ago. So it's maker learning is a kind of mishmash of all of these things, but in reality, it puts the student and their interests and their pursuits right at the center of it, and it's about solutions that come from them.
I can't believe, Stuart, that you've not mentioned my maker dinosaurs.
Well, do you want to mention them, Josh?
No, I thought you'd have naturally brought that up you'd have naturally brought my maker dinosaurs. I did a maker workshop with young people, and we were looking at the area of dinosaurs, and I've never been happier making a dinosaur out of egg boxes, blue tack, Lego motors, and sensors. And I produced this dinosaur, which, well, I'll be honest, I've got so many videos of it. I'll have to tweet them out so people can see them. But it was the most beautiful thing, and it was such an exhilarating feeling. And I learned so much from it. And when I look back, I can still remember what I learned. And that's the important thing. It's about depth of learning as well. And the thing I remember about that activity, because I researched it in order to make this amazing dinosaur with my egg boxes and the like, is that dinosaurs didn't roar. Dinosaurs actually made the sounds of pigeons, and they made a cooing sound. And I never knew that. I really was quite disappointed to find it out as well.
Sure.
But,
the movies have lied to me.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it makes a dinosaur more scary or less scary if it makes the sound of a pigeon, which I did have a discussion with children about. But, again, if you didn't go through that process, if somebody just taught me about dinosaurs, I wouldn't have found out about that. I wouldn't have got that depth of learning. And, that's something that's now going to stay with me. And I'll be honest, it's now going to stay with you as well.
Is there a difference in the way that sort of hands-on and maker learning happens at different levels? So is there a difference between primary and secondary, for example?
Oh, David, that's a really, really interesting question. I think there's a lot of presumptions. I think people think it's more of a natural thing that takes place in primary and in secondary school, that people are older now. It's a complete myth. When I was talking about those 18 and 19-year-olds, and people say, well, yeah, it was a great lesson, and, but what materials did you use? I used Duplo bricks, which is designed for 4-year-olds. And it got everybody buzzing and everybody excited. Young people do get older, all right? That's a scientific fact. But when they get older, you need to give them the license to be playful. It's not that children don't want to be playful, it's that they don't get the license to do it. If you walk into a room of adults, it's like we're having a conversation here online. If I was suddenly to say to you, I tell you what, let's just abandon this podcast and let's go outside and let's play. You'd be thinking, oh, that sounds really cool. Yeah, let's go out and play. It's a very natural human instinct. And all because you get older doesn't mean it disappears. And one of the things that Stuart and I are very keen on is that not just children, but teachers, they need to be playful and they need to remain playful. It's an exciting job, but it's a tough job. But stay playful and you'll stay fresh. So, no, the age thing, I would happily make my egg carton dinosaurs with sixth formers, with adults, with anyone. I don't think it makes a difference.
No, I don't think it does either, because, the experiences that we've had when you do give those teenagers, the opportunity to play, they will take it. But it is this thing that's kind of entrenched in language as children go throughout school. When children are in the early years of their education, everyone knows that play is good for them. That's how they find out about the world. That's how they discover how to communicate with other people. As they move throughout their education, once they leave those early years and enter, say, year one or reception, suddenly they're only allowed to play at playtimes. There's now a time for play and a time for work. And as they move throughout school, then the language changes. It's no longer called play; it's called break. So we actually start to erode this idea that we're allowed to play. And we do that through language, but also through this strange assumption that the way young people work in schools has to somehow change, and it doesn't. Now, don't get me wrong. This sounds like we're very, very kind of laissez-faire with things like Lego bricks. Oh yeah, just go and build stuff and do what you like. It's not that at all. There is a structure here. We're not against knowledge acquisition. But if that's all education is, if that's what it boils down to, without the playfulness, then we've got a real problem. Actually, we have a real problem as students get older. We've got a real problem as they enter the workplace, and keeping that playful experience is essential. If we look at what the Lego Foundation define as play, they see it as having 5 characteristics. One is joyfulness. Now that's kind of obvious, but then play is also meaningful. It has to connect with you. But it's also engaging, iterative. So that's that bit about failure again. We fail, we get up, we put it right, we carry on. And the last one is a really important one. The last one is socially interactive. Now, if we just circle back to maker learning a little bit, one of the key aspects of maker learning is community. Developing a sense of community, and we can do that in a variety of ways. This could be, as simple as getting everyone together and everyone showing off their robots and what they've done, and it could be as expansive as something that's international, because community means feedback. Feedback means that we can move on with our learning, and that kind of developing that aspect of learning is incredibly important, because it can also lead to collaboration.
I mean, Stuart mentioned the Lego Foundation, and the Lego Foundation in 2018 released a report called the Playwell report, and it highlights the importance of play. And play is still held in high esteem by parents and the like. And for me, it's been very interesting because in the last year, during the pandemic, people have started to be concerned about young people's mental health. And people have said young people have got to be given the opportunity to play more. Well, yeah, I mean, I've known that for years. It's not a pandemic that suddenly made this happen. It's an inherent need for us all and young people in schools to be playful. And I take nothing positive out of the pandemic, other than maybe that this has helped shine a spotlight on the need for young people in schools to have playful learning experience, deep and rich playful learning experiences.
Absolutely.
Well, it's been great to hear that sort of distinction then around the importance of play, but at the same time not trying to take away that knowledge acquisition bit, because that's what I was kind of wondering about. So if somebody does want to kind of introduce more play into the activities that they're wanting to set and take on with their classes and their students, sort of what advice would you give to a teacher that was starting out thinking about doing that? Where should they start their thinking?
Well, I think they should start simply. And, sometimes people set off down this route and, bearing in mind, Raising Robots sells Lego. The first thing I'd say is don't buy a lot of resources, buy when it's demand driven, try things with your children, see what works for you as a teacher. One of my favorite activities, and we've mentioned it, it's 6 bricks. If you type 6 bricks into Google, Lego Foundation 6 bricks, you'll find lots of playful activities that just involve using 6 bricks. And it's a great way to get into it. And they don't have to be Lego bricks. Lego emphasizes that they can be bits of wood and, basically anything you can stack on top of each other. But it's a great way of getting into the idea of playful learning and hands-on learning. And there's no huge expense involved. All the resources are free. And I think it's a great way to start.
And when you talked about sort of setting that challenge and the making sure that that's a real world challenge, obviously that opens up the opportunity then for the student to be solving that in many different ways and presumably getting into lots of different subject areas, different topics that might suddenly become relevant to what they've now got in front of them. Something that starts off then, how do you try and, as a kind of a first project, would you want something that was quite, I don't want to use the word constrictive, but sort of somehow set some boundaries on that to avoid it spiraling into a whole, far too quickly? Or do you kind of go, actually, that's not quite the principle of it. If it goes there, then it goes there, and engage with that, embrace that.
Yeah,
David, that's a really good point. And sometimes people think that when you're working with people in this way, that you require less planning and less sort of scaffolding and all of those things. I think you need a little bit more. You really need to think through processes. So although we're saying you don't always know where you end up, we have an expectation of where we're going to end up. Sometimes there's nice surprises. Now, when I teach Lego, young people can do incredible things with Lego bricks, but sometimes I'm trying to teach particular concepts and ideas, and children want to show me other amazing things that I've done. And teachers often say this to me, oh, well, they've done all these things, but they haven't done what I needed them to do. And that is a challenge. The way I handle it in a classroom is that I always, in a very casual way, write up the things that I need them to do. And when they're showing me the extra things, I always say really excitedly, I tell you what, I'd love to see those things, but have you done the things that I asked you to do? And children then work out. Look, we work in the UK, we work in a system where there's exams and all those sorts of things. And there are, little hoops that maybe we'd look at and say we don't want to go through them, but we have to. But that doesn't stop you being creative in the way that you actually set about learning, but you do have to plan it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. But I think you have to plan it with the understanding that it may well spiral, and that's okay. But ultimately, as a teacher, you are facilitating that learning. It's your skill, it's your artistry that then guides that learning to perhaps for want of a better word, tick those boxes. But John's right. You do need you need a mindset that is not quite as narrow as just planning one particular set of skills or knowledge boxes that you want those students to learn. Because what often happens there is that students become frustrated that they can't express their other interests or make those connections within that subject area. So when we think about STEM learning or STEAM learning, which is really what we're talking about here, that really is about making sense of various subject disciplines and seeing those kind of interconnected relationships between those subject areas. And Lego education and the robotics aspects of that is a great vehicle for teachers to start thinking about that kind of learning in their classrooms. And ultimately, it's much more satisfying than planning a very narrowly focused lesson.
Have you been to schools or had conversations where there have been other challenges that people have made about the difficulty of doing this as opposed to the normal or the teaching approaches that schools are normally taking? What sort of challenges also come up, and how do you address those?
Yeah, I mean, there is the quite common, if you like, assumption that why are my children just playing with Lego? Or that can come from the teachers as well as the parents. Mm-hmm. So really, we go when we run training sessions, we talk as much about the educational theories and the educational concepts and the pedagogy around Lego education as much as we do about this is how you use it.
Mm-hmm.
And once teachers make that connection, once they understand that actually this is not something that they might use in addition to what they already do in the classroom, but more something that they use to integrate into their existing curriculum. That is a tool for learning. Yes, it's Lego bricks. Yes, it's fun, and yes, it's engaging, but actually it's just another tool for learning. From science through to technology, through to language development and emotional development, everything is kind of within that, within that resource. And, that once that penny drops, then we really see great things start to happen.
Great. So I think we're getting towards the end now. I'd love to thank both John and Stuart for taking the time out to come and speak with us today. I think there's been a range of really interesting topics, all the way from what hands-on and how learning and using play is important, right the way through some of the challenges that come up and how people can get in, can maybe address those by just giving it a go, thinking about the planning. That sounds like it's a really important thing. This isn't just a free-for-all, with some bricks. There's still objectives that can be targeted and addressed there. So that all sounds brilliant. Before I get to my last question then, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about where they can find you, find out more information about you and the things that you're doing. John, where can we find out about what you're up to?
You can find out about me at raisingrobots.com. At our website, but much more interesting than the website is on Twitter, which is at Raising Robots. You can see examples of everything that we do with young people and teachers, and lots of beautifully created things that you can admire and be inspired by. So, you can direct messages through Twitter, but please take time to look at the beautiful creativity that's on show.
And Stuart?
Very similar. About you? My website is ies.london, but there's a link to that, and there's information about me as well on the Raising Robots site. John and I work very, very closely together, and so really, if you want a one-stop shop, then the Raising Robots site is it. Absolutely.
I think the plus of us at Raising Robots is everybody at Raising Robots is a teacher or has been a teacher. So we know what it's like to be in a classroom and to work with children and young people. And we know what works and what, in our experience, what doesn't work. And that's really important. So we don't have the answer to everything, but we're always in a position to support people and help people. We set up Raising Robots really to discuss learning ideas with teachers, not just to sell Lego boxes, because that's the easy bit, but it's then what you do with them that generates the real excitement. So there's lots of good information on our website, and our contact details are there. I think it's come up several times in conversation, so I'll mention it again. The Lego Foundation and Six Bricks, do have a look at those materials, because I think that's a great starting point as well. And Lego have other initiatives that are free. Build the Change is another really fun and creative experience. I think they're running something at the moment on the environment, getting young people involved in that. And it doesn't require the purchase of Lego sets, but it does require the creativity of young people. So that would be a great thing to be involved in.
In terms of other kind of wider reading, if you like, around maker learning or around hands-on learning, certainly John mentioned the Play Well report from the Lego Foundation. That's a fairly quick read, a fairly easy read. There's some great books out there. A book by a chap called Mitchell Resnick, who works at MIT in the lifelong kindergarten, and is a great friend to Lego education. his book, Lifelong Kindergarten, again, it's a fairly quick read, but that just really lays out a lot of what we've been talking about having a passion for learning, about getting creative and hands-on, and about learning by making. So it's that's a recommended read from me.
Brilliant. Well, thank you both again. I think that comes to the end of our episode on hands-on learning. For everyone listening, don't forget to tell your friends and colleagues all about us, and you can rate our show on whatever platform you're listening on. Our show notes will have lots of useful links to everything that we've discussed and the things that John and Stuart have just been mentioning at the end there. So don't forget to go and check those out. And you can also remember you can follow us on Twitter at CUP Education, or use the hashtag BrighterPod to get in touch. You can also email us on educationmarketing@cambridge.org. So thank you both once again, and we hope to see everybody else next time.